Welcome to Zarila HOA Stories, where real communities reveal the hidden tensions behind their perfect facades. At first glance, the neighborhood of Willow Creek looked like a picture from a real estate brochure. Wide streets lined with tall oaks, tidy lawns, and pastel-colored houses that caught the afternoon light. Neighbors waved politely to one another as they collected mail or watered their plants. It was the kind of place people moved to for peace, safety, and a sense of belonging. The Homeowners Association, or HOA, promised to keep everything that way, clean, organized, and problem-free. Among the families living there was the Parkers, Michael, his wife Laura, and their 19-year-old daughter, Emily. Emily had been born with a serious heart condition, something that had shaped the rhythm of her family's life. But despite her health struggles, she carried a bright, easy smile that made people around her soften. She volunteered at the local pet shelter and spent weekends sketching flowers on the porch. Her parents had chosen Willow Creek precisely because of its calm, quiet atmosphere, a place where Emily could live without stress. In the first few months, everything seemed perfect. The HOA organized small community picnics, the lawns stayed green, and people exchanged friendly nods on morning walks. But as time went on, it became clear that the rules governing this so-called harmony were strict and enforced by one woman more firmly than anyone else. Her name was Karen Miller. She had been on the HOA board for nearly 8 years, a position she treated more like a badge of authority than a community service. Always neatly dressed and clutching her clipboard, she walked the streets every morning, checking for rule violations. A trash can left too close to the curb? Warning notice. A car parked overnight on the street? Fine. Grass an inch too long? Complaint filed. Most residents didn't dare challenge her. Some admired her dedication. Others whispered that she went too far. She means well, one neighbor might say. She just wants everything perfect. But behind closed doors, many avoided her. Children playing in the street would stop their bikes when they saw her coming, and parents would quickly pull in lawn chairs before she could comment about cluttered driveways. Laura Parker, Emily's mother, tried to stay polite. She greeted Karen whenever their paths crossed, even baked cookies for the annual HOA meeting. But she sensed something rigid and cold in the woman's demeanor, a need for control that didn't leave room for empathy. As months passed, the once welcoming atmosphere in Willow Creek began to shift. Small disagreements over parking spaces, lawn decorations, and minor repairs started to feel heavier. People no longer chatted easily at the mailbox. Attention hung in the air, unspoken but unmistakable. One evening, while sitting on their porch, Emily noticed Karen pacing near a neighbor's driveway, pointing at a car parked slightly beyond the painted line. She turned to her mother and asked softly, "Doesn't she ever rest?" Laura chuckled at first, but then sighed. Some people just don't know how to let go. What no one realized was that these seemingly harmless moments were part of something larger, an invisible web of resentment spreading through the neighborhood. The HOA's strict structure gave Karen and a few others the power to make decisions that affected everyone. And while some tried to ignore it, others quietly began to push back. In interviews that would later take place, several residents admitted that by this point, they were already uneasy. It felt like walking on eggshells, one recalled. You never knew what would set someone off. A parked car, a missing signature, a note on your door. The Parkers did their best to stay out of the growing disputes. Their focus was on Emily's health and happiness. But the small rules and warnings began creeping closer to their doorstep. A letter about a garden hose left out too long, another about their car being parked on the street overnight. Each one carried Karen's signature. That night, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, Michael Parker looked out the window at the row of parked cars glinting in the fading light. The street was quiet, too quiet. Something about it felt uneasy, as if the perfect order of Willow Creek was about to break. The soft hum of distant sprinklers filled the silence, but beneath it, a storm was beginning to form. The camera of life, unseen but ever-present, lingered on that stretch of cars, lined perfectly along the curb. They looked harmless, ordinary. Yet in the days to come, those very cars would become the center of an argument that would change the neighborhood forever. It was a warm Saturday afternoon, the kind of day when sunlight made everything look peaceful. The Parkers had just returned from the grocery store, their car loaded with bags and a few boxes of bottled water. Since their driveway was temporarily blocked by gardening tools from earlier yard work, Michael parked the car for a few minutes along the curb in front of a neighbor's house, only a few steps from their front door. Emily stepped out first, carrying a light bag and laughing softly at something her mother said. She moved slowly, careful not to overexert herself. Her heart condition often left her short of breath, but she tried never to let it show. The family had nearly finished unloading when the familiar sound of firm footsteps echoed across the sidewalk. Karen Miller, holding her clipboard as usual, walked straight toward them. Her lips were pressed tight, her expression already sharp. "You can't park there," she snapped before she even reached them. "This is a violation of HOA regulations. Street parking is restricted in this section." Laura turned, slightly startled. "Oh, Karen, we're just unloading groceries. It'll only be a minute." "That's not the point," Karen interrupted, her tone rising. "Rules are rules. If I let you do it, everyone will start doing it." Emily, trying to ease the tension, stepped forward and spoke quietly. "Ma'am, we'll move it right after this. I just can't carry too much at once because of my heart condition." But Karen didn't soften. Her eyes flicked briefly toward Emily, then back to Laura. "That's unfortunate," she said flatly, "but it doesn't change the rules. Please move the car immediately." Michael, who had been silent until then, clenched his jaw. He wanted to argue, but knew it would only make things worse. Instead, he muttered, "Fine," and drove the car into their driveway as soon as the space was clear. Karen stood there a moment longer, jotting something on her clipboard before turning away. At first, the Parkers tried to brush off the incident. It felt petty, just another example of Karen's obsession with control. But within a week, small warnings began appearing in their mailbox. A printed notice about improper lawn maintenance, another about trash bins visible from the street, a third about unauthorized street parking. Each letter bore the HOA logo and was unsigned. Laura read them with growing frustration. "This is ridiculous," she told her husband one evening. "It's her. She's behind all of it." Michael sighed. "If we ignore it, maybe she'll stop." But she didn't stop. More notes followed, and one morning, Laura caught Karen taking photos of their front yard. "Documentation," Karen said simply when Laura confronted her. "If everyone just followed the rules, there'd be no problems." Word spread quickly through the neighborhood. Some residents felt sympathy for the Parkers, quietly offering kind words or shaking their heads when Karen's name came up. Others tried to stay neutral, afraid of getting involved. "She's the HOA board member," one neighbor whispered. "You don't want to be on her bad side." Still, there were those who sided with Karen. "The Parkers should just follow the rules like everyone else," one man commented during a casual evening walk. "No one's above the HOA." The small, polite community began to split into quiet factions. Conversations grew shorter. Smiles disappeared. Where once people greeted each other with warmth, now they avoided eye contact. Around this time, Michael installed a small security camera near the garage, mostly for safety, but it soon captured glimpses of something more unsettling. Karen's car would occasionally slow down in front of their house, headlights off, as she seemed to check for violations even at night. Meanwhile, Emily tried to keep her spirits up. "It's silly, Mom," she said one afternoon while helping in the garden. "We're fighting over parking spaces and lawns. People have bigger problems." Laura smiled sadly. "I wish everyone saw it that way." The breaking point came one evening when Laura returned home to find Karen standing on the sidewalk again, clipboard in hand, snapping pictures of their mailbox post. Laura walked up tired and angry. "Karen, this is enough," she said firmly. "We followed every rule. Why are you still bothering us?" Karen didn't look up. "Your grass still exceeds the HOA limit by 1 inch," she replied coldly. Laura's voice trembled. "Do you even hear yourself? This isn't about grass anymore. You've been harassing my family for weeks." For the first time, Karen looked her directly in the eyes. "If you can't handle living by community standards, maybe this isn't the right neighborhood for you." Neighbors peeked through blinds as the two women stood face to face, their voices echoing in the quiet evening. Someone across the street recorded part of it on their phone. A shaky clip showing Karen pointing toward the lawn and Laura gesturing back, her voice breaking with emotion. The argument ended abruptly when Michael came out and guided Laura inside. Karen walked away without another word, jotting something in her notebook as she went. No one knew it then, but that confrontation marked the point of no return. What had started as a harmless parking dispute had turned into something deeper, a personal feud that was beginning to consume an entire neighborhood. The morning began quietly, with golden light spilling through the trees that lined Willow Creek's tidy streets. Birds sang in the distance, sprinklers ticked rhythmically, and the world felt as ordinary as ever. Inside the Parker home, Laura helped Emily gather her things for a medical appointment. The routine was familiar: water bottle, medical file, a light sweater in case the clinic felt cold. Despite her health challenges, Emily always tried to start her days with a smile. "Maybe after the appointment, we can stop for smoothies," she said cheerfully as they headed out. They climbed into their silver sedan and eased out of the driveway. The air smelled faintly of fresh-cut grass. Emily hummed softly to herself as her mother drove toward the neighborhood's gated exit. Traffic there was often tight in the mornings. Parents heading to work, kids waiting for the school bus, delivery trucks trying to squeeze through. Still, it was manageable. Nothing about that morning seemed unusual. As they approached the gate, the line of cars slowed. A maintenance van was partly blocking one side of the exit, forcing everyone into a single lane. Laura waited patiently for her turn to go through, glancing in the mirror to make sure Emily was comfortable. But then another car pulled up sharply behind them, a dark blue SUV. Its horn blared once, short and sharp. Laura looked back and instantly recognized the driver. Karen Miller. Karen's expression was tight, her hands gripping the steering wheel. She motioned angrily toward the gate, signaling for Laura to move forward. But Laura couldn't. The van still blocked the path. She raised a hand through the window, gesturing that she'd go as soon as it was clear. Karen honked again, longer this time. Emily frowned. "Why is she always like this?" she murmured softly. Laura exhaled slowly, trying to stay calm. "Just ignore it, honey. We'll be out in a second." But the tension didn't fade. Karen rolled down her window, shouting something Laura couldn't quite hear over the engine noise. Laura cracked her window slightly to respond, her voice measured but firm. "There's a van, Karen. I can't move until it's clear." Witnesses later said they could hear both women, one frustrated, the other trying to reason. Voices rose, overlapping in the air like heat waves. A man walking his dog nearby recalled seeing Karen gesturing wildly, her face red with anger. "It looked like just another argument," he said later. "No one thought it would go beyond that." Moments passed, tense, heavy moments that would later replay endlessly in people's minds. Then came the chaos. What exactly triggered it remains debated. A sudden movement, a misunderstanding, or a split-second loss of control. But in that instant, everything changed. Neighbors heard the commotion and rushed outside. Some described shouts, others said they heard someone cry out. Within minutes, sirens pierced the calm morning air. Red and blue lights flashed across the street as emergency vehicles swarmed the entrance to Willow Creek. Residents gathered at a distance, their faces pale and confused. No one could fully understand what had just happened. A few people recorded snippets on their phones, shaky videos showing police officers directing people back, paramedics working swiftly, and neighbors holding each other, stunned. Emily was rushed to the hospital in an ambulance, her mother beside her, trembling. Karen stood off to the side near her car, surrounded by officers. The same gate that symbolized security and order now looked like the boundary between the world they knew and one they would never return to. As news spread, panic rippled through the community. Parents pulled their children indoors. Phones rang nonstop. People whispered names, trying to confirm what had happened. One resident, tears in her eyes, said quietly, "I thought our neighborhood was safe. Things like this don't happen here." Later that day, police tape cordoned off the entire street. Reporters arrived, their vans lining the once peaceful road. Neighbors watched from behind curtains as officers collected evidence and spoke with witnesses. The air felt heavy, as if the whole neighborhood was holding its breath. By evening, the calm suburb that had once felt picture-perfect was silent except for the hum of generators and the occasional murmur of investigators. The Parkers' house lights remained off, and Karen's SUV was gone, impounded by authorities. Those who lived in Willow Creek would remember that morning forever, the one that started so ordinary and ended with everything changed. It wasn't just the shock of violence that lingered. It was the sense that something inside their community had cracked wide open. It was like our whole community broke that day, a longtime neighbor said softly in the days that followed. All the rules, the meetings, the complaints, they were supposed to make us safer. But in the end, they built walls between us instead. And as night fell on Willow Creek, the streets that once echoed with laughter were quiet. The perfect neighborhood was gone, replaced by a silence that spoke louder than any siren ever could. The days following the tragedy at Willow Creek were filled with disbelief. A neighborhood once known for its perfect lawns and strict order was now surrounded by flashing news cameras and yellow police tape. Residents stood outside in small groups, speaking in hushed voices, their faces pale and drawn. For many, it didn't feel real. The sound of sirens had faded, but the echo of what happened lingered in every corner of the street. Karen Miller was arrested that same afternoon. The image of her being led away in handcuffs spread quickly across local news channels, a shocking contrast to the woman who once carried a clipboard through the neighborhood, enforcing rules with unshakable confidence. The HOA board scrambled to distance itself from her actions, releasing a brief statement expressing deep sadness and cooperation with law enforcement. But the community was not convinced. Many residents began asking harder questions. How did things reach this point? How could so much tension have been ignored? The HOA, once a symbol of order, now stood at the center of public outrage. Meetings that had once drawn only a handful of people were suddenly overflowing with residents demanding accountability. Some accused the board of creating an environment of hostility, one where small grievances grew unchecked and authority became a weapon rather than a service. Others admitted that they too had stayed silent when they saw the situation between Karen and the Parkers escalating. Meanwhile, Emily's family grieved quietly. Their home became a gathering place for friends, neighbors, and even strangers who came to leave flowers, cards, and candles by the front steps. Laura, pale but composed, spoke to local reporters a week later. Her voice trembled as she said, "This isn't just about what happened to my daughter. It's about how we treat each other when we disagree. No rule, no HOA policy should ever matter more than a person's life." Her words resonated deeply. Soon after, she and her husband began working with local organizations to promote kindness, empathy, and mental health awareness in neighborhoods. They launched a small campaign called Hearts Over Rules, encouraging residents' associations to replace rigid enforcement with community support. Flyers appeared across nearby towns, bearing Emily's smile and the slogan, "Respect can save lives." In the months that followed, the story of Willow Creek spread beyond the local area. News stations covered it as a cautionary tale, a reminder of how quickly control and pride could turn something peaceful into something devastating. Protests formed outside the HOA office demanding reform. Residents called for limits on HOA power, transparency in board decisions, and training in conflict resolution. The HOA eventually dissolved and was restructured under new leadership, promising a focus on compassion and communication rather than punishment. For the first time, residents began holding open meetings where anyone could speak freely. Old grudges softened. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in months started sharing coffee and conversations again. It was a slow healing, but it was happening. When Karen's trial began, the courtroom was packed. Some came seeking justice, others seeking understanding. Her defense argued that years of stress and community pressure had pushed her over the edge, but the prosecution emphasized her repeated aggression and misuse of power. The verdict, guilty of involuntary manslaughter, was met with quiet relief, but also sadness. Nothing could undo what had been lost. After the trial, Emily's family addressed the public once more. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, Laura said softly. It means learning. If this tragedy teaches us anything, it's that empathy must come before authority. Months later, the neighborhood of Willow Creek began to look normal again. The police tape was gone, lawns were trimmed, and new families moved in. Yet, the silence that once felt peaceful now carried memory. Where the confrontation had occurred, residents placed a small stone bench engraved with the words, "In memory of Emily Parker. May peace live where anger once stood." Every evening, the sun would catch on that stone, reflecting softly across the street, a quiet reminder of the price the neighborhood had paid for its perfection. And in the end, when the world finally moved on, those who had lived through it knew they would never forget. They had seen how control could turn to cruelty and how loss could awaken compassion. One of the older residents summed it up best during a local interview. "We all ignored the warning signs, the anger, the rules, the division, and now we live with it. But maybe, in remembering, we can make sure it never happens again." As the months passed, peace returned to Willow Creek. Not the kind enforced by rules and fines, but the kind born from understanding. The streetlights glowed warmly over driveways where neighbors once again waved to one another. And though Emily was gone, her presence lingered, not as sorrow, but as a lesson. Because in every neighborhood, true harmony isn't written in regulations. It's found in kindness, forgiveness, and the courage to care.